Today, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. Each CFO's office needs an answer to know, what's enough. Is it RPA or artificial intelligence? We have an exciting conversation lined up with Amit Srivastava. He's working with HighRadius as Senior Director of Digital Transformation. Would you like to please go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Madhurima. I come with a traditional 14 plus years of experience into the finance and accounting space. I've been a part of the digital transformation journey for a little over 9 years out of the 14 years. I've been part of the delivery, consulting, into the foundation services, and then into the ERP implementation, and majorly focusing on the RPAs and AI. And over the last couple of years, I've been focused around the CFO advisory space, wherein it has been majorly focused around building the transformation journey, transformation roadmap, RPA, AI, what could be really picked up for a business to take it to the next level.
Thanks for sharing your background with us. The first question that I have for you, Amit, it's around how our target personas at times use AI and RPA interchangeably.
What I call AI as a complementary sibling to your RPA robot. AI handles around complex process, which really requires a cognitive decision-making ability for a certain activity to be performed, and that's where it differentiates itself from an RPA. There's still a lot of confusion, a lot of talks around what is the uniqueness, what really differentiates between an AI and RPA. And it's very important at certain stages that RPA works independently, AI works independently, and in certain places, both of them really need to work together to deliver a digital transformation roadmap.
So can you please explain where and how AI should actually be used and what's best for CFO's office?
I divide those things into three pieces, right? One is you really need to classify your processes, activities, or an work that you're doing into three various parts. One is, does your work really requires a workflow which needs to use a predictions in place? Something like your valuation, what could be my future value of a certain work that I'm doing or a transaction that I'm doing. And that is a place where an AI really comes in very handy. Certain processes wherein there's a lot of decision-making ability is involved, right? We do not have one variable that is required to arrive at an output, but there are various variables available. Last but not the least is about the structuredness of the data, where the data are highly unstructured, scrapping a data out of invoices, which are like a handwritten, which are something, an email information which is coming, which is required to be scrapped out to arrive at a certain logical steps. So that's the key differences in how do you really go about picking your RPA versus an AI.
We were going through the calls that we've had with our prospects, and I remember one of the prospects mentioning that they've implemented RPA for aggregating payments and remittances received from multiple sources. However, cash application was sort of done for them in terms of automation. So can you explain that how an AI-based solution would have been a better solution for this prospect?
Cash application as a process which you speak about has traditionally been one of the major AR pain points. If you look about before the RPA and AI came into picture, the typical automation that we typically done was as a part of the processes where Excel macros that people were using to automate the steps or non-value added steps. The remittances that you typically tend to receive, okay, assuming that you're receiving this in email, right? The first thing that your macros would typically do is once they have a remittances available in an Excel sheet, it would typically go back and do a scripting between your ERPs and your Excel, and it will start pushing in all the information and work like a macros in an Excel. What did an RPA did? So at number one, where you had an email, someone pulls up an Excel file, goes and run a macros, and then typically your matching starts happening around. There's no logic, there's no decision that is really being used. It's just that step 1, 2, 3 that needs to be performed. And a logic is built up to push the transactions in a macro or an Excel into an ERP. When we talk about an RPA, it went on to a next level. Now, people really did not want to even open an email box. They knew there is an email coming out from a certain email ID. They expected an RPA to go back to your email boxes, pick up an information from this particular person who's sending across, convert those Excel, convert those remittances, which is coming into a readable format for an RPA to perform similar step of what your Excel macros were doing. And what has happened in an AI space, what is typically people are striving to move into an AI space, is that you know the person who is sending you across an email, but you are not sure sometimes that would it be an Excel, would it be an image, or would it be any kind of email body that really needs to be would really come in. Now you have an AI in place, which is also mimicking a human action, but with more cognitive in place, where you know who is sending it across. It's deciding if the information received is right or wrong. If it is going back into ERP, processing those transactions and throwing those exceptions for someone to bring into an element. And also, it's also bringing an element of the analytics of predictive in place that I know that 8 out of 10 times the information that I'm going to receive is going to be wrong. So AI is going to eventually is actually making those decisions over a period of time. So it becomes very important when you pick between an AI automation or an RPA, where does your process typically falls in, right? And if I go back to your questions, that how does an AI typically end up solving this problem? It's also very important to also go back and look at the processes where it really falls and the overall action as safe. That is your process something where it really requires a lot of extraction, a lot of predictive stuff that you require as a part of the processes. You have an information which is coming in, but you really require someone to do a research and go back and start doing an application. Or it's a process which is a simple process. You receive an email from certain individual, it goes back and starts applying those things. Apart from this, AI also brings in that ability of making a prediction. So for an example, you receive an invoices on a remittances. However, you typically are not sure that the information given is right or wrong. So based on certain combinations, and the way you build your algorithm, it could typically tell you what are the potential invoices that it needs to pick up, and it can eventually go back and either apply it based on the rules that have been set up, or go back and send it across to an individual and have a confirmation from them.
What we found is that implementing and maintaining an RPA can cost up to 10 times more than what an AI solution can cost in a longer run. Why customers at times choose to implement AI given their dissatisfaction with RPA. However, the mid-market executives are still more concerned about rate of returns from their investment in AI. So why do you think that there is this gap?
The gap element. Why do we believe that AI really did not work on? I mean, there are only 20%, 20 to 25% of the AI projects that those are picked up really make a move from your pilot to production, right? So it's very important to identify, do a beginning with a pilot and scale it across the enterprise where you feel it should be or could be implemented. That's number one. Okay. Second is lay a firm foundations, right? A mix of both people and technology. What kind of people should you be really hiring, or should you really be hiring, or you should be really getting someone externally to solve this problem for you? And on the technology space, what technology space are you really in? Does your product or the ERP that you're using is agnostic to the solution that you bring in, or will it really require you to change the technology that you have to make a decision? Third is around getting your data right. I mean, you really need to ensure that whatever information, whatever insight that you're bringing in, or whatever information that you're doing, for you to bring that insight onto the table, you really need to ensure that you're solving the right problem, right? You're not focusing too much on exceptions and trying to make it as a large scale, but ensure that you have a large data set in place. And last but not the least is you need to really seek out the order of the chaos that you want to solve. As I said, they always would want to go big, but then there would be certain problems that you would typically want to solve as a part of the finance community, the finance leader. You really need to understand what are the top 1, 2, 3 department or business problems that you would solve within the finance, and then go around doing anything. So that's not creating a chaos, but trying to identify based on data and the forms that I spoke about. Your ROIs are typically calculated with more internal focus that they would typically do. And when you implement an AI, you typically say that, okay, I have reduced my headcount from X to X minus 1, right? There are certain metrics that they have improved. There are certain headcounts that they have reduced. That's calculated as a part of an ROI. How does the implementation really solve a problem of increasing a customer revenue or impacting a working capital is something always missed around. If you bring in those elements of both internal and external focus, it should give you an ROI that you expected to arrive. And the reason it differentiates from an RPA, because in RPA, your premise is that processes or technology might not change in a given duration of time. But in AI, you expect the system to pick up, learn, and go back and change itself. That's a cognitive decision that you really bring onto the table.
So, which according to you is a costlier solution to implement? Is it RP or is it an AI solution?
Something which is implemented incorrectly is always a costlier solution, right? Your ROIs should typically be a 3 year, 5 year that you should be really looking at. And that's the reason I said everyone will want to do it, want a quick result, right? I mean, that's good to have, but then when you make a technology change, always, but nail down what your problem statement is, okay? And make sure that the goals that you're trying to achieve is based on the various selection criteria based on which you really made this problem statement. The size of the business, the timeline, the quantity, and the various other influencing factors that helps you in identifying the problem statement should typically be used when you try to achieve at a goal. And once the goal is achieved, AI and RPA is always your lever for achieving those goals, right? Chalk it out, identify what's the maturity level of your businesses or processes. Is it something which is very basic in nature, which is a processes which is very of a very high caliber, very high end solution? And what you really require is an insight-based solution. Have three sets: only AI, only RPA, or the best processes is where you have RPA and AI both, where in certain part of the processes for which which are repetitive in nature is taken care by RPA, but something which you require a cognitive or a predictive in nature, AI, you can pick it up from there.
Understood. Great. So thanks for your time today, Amit. It was amazing
So,
to talk to you and demystify the issues that are there when it comes to RPA and AI. We'll be back with more for all our viewers out there. Stay tuned.